in the sense that
So I'm not getting the idea. How can we pitch a patent?
that is an idea, is it not? So if you are working on a patent, then you say, okay, this is the context where the problem exists. Hmm? And the way the problem exists, this is the kind of loss that is happening to the exchequer, whichever company you are in, wherever you are manufacturing that stuff or whatever you're doing. This is the kind of loss that is happening because this problem continues to exist. So the first thing that we have to look at is the problem statement. See this point, problem statement there. I'm sorry. You have to look at the problem statement. That is the first thing. So that is what you contextualize, that this is the problem statement that this patent still does not solve. Then you say, we worked on the problem statement, we applied this, and we have this set of ideas, or this idea which we believe can solve the problem. And when you use this, then something happens. If you do not use this, something else happens. And to implement this is the cost. This is the, for example, if it's a patent on a circuit, then this is the kind of power loss that you expect, but this is the kind of performance improvement that you expect. So this is the way the things would change. And that's why we believe that you should go ahead and file this patent for us. Or that is why we believe that you should go and sponsor a project with this, implementing these ideas. Or that is why we think that you should help us, you should allow us to work on a BTP with you, for that matter, all those things. So then that's the last thing. What is it that you're looking for when you want to pitch this idea? Does this help?
Yes.
Yeah. So if it's a product, it's a product. You say that is why we want to manufacture this product and we want you to fund our startup. If it's an idea on a patent, then you say that this is where the improvement is, and this is where we want you to fund the patent. We want you to help us or allow us to pursue this as a BTP. You allow us to do this work with you and all that. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. So if there are no more questions, then let's move ahead. We have one part of problem identification that we have not touched. See, in this course, we have talked about feature transfer. We have talked about 9 screens. We've talked about this function analysis part. We talked about flow analysis in the last class, which is again not usually taken up in the beginner level course. We have talked about cause effect chain analysis. We have talked about trimming also. But in this class, we will talk about evolutionary trend analysis, and we will also talk about S curves over here, so that whatever situation you are in as an engineer, when you face a problem, you should be able to organize it in a way that it becomes easy to solve. Okay, so the beginner course, and in fact when you reorganize it, sometimes the solutions are so intuitive that लगता है कि ये तो problem actually में थी नहीं, the solution was already inbuilt. So we saw this in trimming. When we trimmed some stuff, then intuitively we arrived at some solutions. So that is how TRIZ handles problems, where we first, as a first part of things, we just try to understand the problem, twist it, turn it, look at the causes, look at the function model where the problem is, do trimming, do all that. In addition to that, we also look at evolutionary trend analysis. So what is evolutionary trend analysis? So trends of engineering system evolution are statistically proven directions of engineering systems. That how an engineering system would naturally develop from one state to another. And these categories are statistically true for all categories of engineering systems. In the class, we will look at a few examples today, but a much more detail of trends of engineering system evolution is covered in the advanced level courses. And the beginner level course, we only introduce this concept to you, and you can read much more about it. There are lots of stuff available on it online. Okay. So there is an overarching trend called trend of S-curve evolution. We will introduce what S-curve is, but that is the trend of S-curve evolution. which says that for any product or any engineering system, as we progress over time, there is a trend of increasing value. Okay, that there is. So, what is value? We discussed this in earlier classes. What is value? When we discussed about main parameter of value, we discussed about value. What is value?
The function by cost.
Yeah, the total sum of functionality upon total sum of cost.
Of course.
So there is a trend of increasing value. That is the overarching trend. Ki any engineering system, it is human endeavor, an endeavor of every engineer to be able to add more value in the engineering system than what existed earlier. Is it not? See, all of us as engineers, are we not learning that day in and day out? Are we not getting trained to solve problems so that things can be done better? No? Why are you all of you doing engineering degrees? What is the final objective that you want to gain? Hello? It's a question. We don't know why we are doing engineering? I will wait for an answer. I will not move forward. You keep mum, I will keep mum. Both of us will, all of us will simply sit here looking at each other. At least you look at me. I don't look at you, but you look at me. And I know I'm not that handsome that you keep on looking at me. So Shakeen, why do we want to improve our technical skills? Okay, to make people's lives easier. So in a way, we are adding value to people's lives, is it not? So all our engineering endeavors are to add more value, and therefore it is very natural that every engineering system. So see, when you look at this graph over here, you will see it is बहुत intuitive है. But yes, it is. It's just that we need to recognize that ऐसा होना है. Many times what you will notice is that as designers, we may want to introduce some changes into an engineering system where some functionality would increase, but the cost would increase much more. So if functionality increases by, let us say, delta, but cost increases by 2 delta, what happens to value? Does value increase or value decreases?
Decreases.
It decreases. So we as engineers end up doing that. So this trend says that if you propose a solution due to which the value of the system or the value that the system brings reduces, that solution will not work. It will not be a sustainable solution. So whatever solution you come up with as a part of your project 2, or whatever solutions you came up with as a part of your project 1 or earlier, just go back and reflect. Is the value increasing or is it decreasing? And you will know the quality of your work automatically right there. Okay, so that is then. So while we say there is a trend of S-curve evolution, there is this trend of increasing value. That value should increase. Okay, now how does the value increase? So one of the trends of increasing value is trend of transition to the super system. We'll look at an example of that in the next slide. That you transition your operation, your system from system to super system, that the super system handles that function altogether. So the system is no longer required. Another is like trend of increasing completeness of system components. That when you start with when you start developing a ecosystem, when you start developing a what do you say, a new product, what can happen and what does happen is that initially it does not have all the components in it. It is only when the product goes to the market, customers start to use it, that you realize, I think this additional functionality or this thing is also required in the system. And that then is a way of saying that the system is getting completed. And one way to look at it is the trend of elimination of human involvement. So for example, Delhi Metro. We started with the Delhi Metro where lots of things were human interfaced, but today the latest metro lines that have been inaugurated, they're driverless. They do not even have a driver. Cars, for that matter, we are talking about self-driving cars. So that they're all following this trend of elimination of human involvement, more automation, so to say. Another way to increase value is to increase the coordination in the system. Okay, and how do we increase the coordination in the system? So one way to look at it is that we are able to increase the controllability. That is, the system, we are able to handle it with much more control. All those sensors and IoT that we talk about, that is a part of this trend where industry 4.0, you will say that, okay, that is a trend of human elimination of human involvement, but it is not happening independently. It is happening because we now have much more control over the way systems would work. There are robots which would automatically take inputs of temperature. They will say that, okay, the temperature needs to be increased, lowered, what needs to be done. And this trend, trend of increasing controllability is in itself fed by trend of increasing dynamicity. So we'll look at this trend also in today's class. Another trend that feeds into the trend of increasing coordination is trend of uneven development of system components. What this trend says is that as you start to develop a system, some parts would develop faster than the other parts. And then those other parts will have to catch up, and therefore there will be a trend of increasing coordination. Okay, so all of us are computer engineers over here. All of us know computers. So just as a matter of fact, in 1994, if you look at the speed of a processor, and then if you look at the speed of the processor, let us say in 2005, 2010, 2015, or even today, today we will say that the speeds have largely saturated, but then we start to look at server processors then. So you will see that the processor speed has improved exponentially. The clock rate at which you operate a processor has increased exponentially. However, all of us also know that for any throughput, you need memory access, is it not? Memory speed has not changed that much. DRAMs, they improved in speed only 2x over every 5 years or something like that. Processor speed improved 2x every 1.5 years, less than that at times. So what happened? There was a performance gap. Processors were developing faster than the DRAMs. So over time, at once cache hierarchy was introduced, a memory hierarchy was introduced. The concept of virtual memory came in. Okay, I know there is a big DRAM there, but my system interacts with the DRAM only notionally. It actually interacts with only L1 cache and L2 cache. So that is the trend of increasing coordination, that when one part of the system develops much faster than the others have to catch up, and there are ways to do that catch up. Okay. Then there's a trend of increasing degree of trimming. So while at one end, we are saying that there is a trend of completeness of system, where components will start to get added into the system, we also need to realize that there is a trend of transition to super system. Combine them together and you will get that there is a trend of increasing degree of trimming. That as systems develop, components that may have been added for the sake of completeness, they will then be slowly trimmed out also, and their functionality will be given to something else. Okay, and then in context of process flows that we discussed, there is a trend of optimization of flows. That flows are continuously worked upon to optimize them, to make them more efficient and effective. Okay, so all these and they're very natural trends, but there is evidence that these trends are at work. We will just look at a few evidence just now, but before that, any questions?
So why it is called S-curve evolution, the trend that we are discussing right now?
Yeah, I will just come to the S-curve thing. We will just cover that, Bilal. Anything else? Okay. So S-curves, what are S-curves? So S-curve is a, how do we put it? S-curve is a kind of movement of value that we observe for any engineering system. And we see that as the MPV of a system changes, main parameter of value, it changes. There is a movement like this, that initially the development is slow. Are you able to see the mark on the slide?
No, sir.
Okay.
Right now it is.
So let's look at this. So what we are saying is that as a system evolves, initially the value does not increase much. You add more functionality, but you also increase the cost because you're adding functionality by adding more components most probably. Have you seen that happen in your look at any aspect of engineering system there? You will see that you will add more functionality, but the cost would also increase simultaneously. So initially the value would be low. Okay. Over time, what would happen is you would continue to add functionality, but you will also start to reduce the cost because you will kick in the trends of trimming, you will kick in the trend of transition to super system, you will kick in those trends, and the functionality would improve and the cost would reduce. After some time, when the product starts to become a commodity product, that is, now this functionality is well established, there's no more completeness required in the system is complete. Now we work on efficiency. That is how to manufacture the system much more efficiently, how to make it available at a much lower cost. So functionality may almost remain constant, but the cost will go down. Then over time, what happens is this cost reduction also saturates. So functionality was constant and cost also went down. So what happens? The MPV will start to saturate. And therefore, because this looks like an S, we call it an S-curve. Are you able to see this? Can you relate an example to me?
So Moore's law curve.
Moore's law, yes. That's a very interesting example. So what is Moore's law?
Number of transistors on a 1 millimeter square chip is double every 18 months.
Okay, that is Moore's law. So to be able to do this, what do? You initially say, okay, let us add more doping, let us add this, let us add that, let us add this kind of feature, that kind of feature. So you make a pilot line and you demonstrate that you can do something with this, that you can actually scale your devices to a more advanced technology. Then you know that I have demonstrated it, now I need to make it work. So in that technology, now what you need to do? You now need to reduce the step somehow. I added this step, but I do not know if this step is actually useful or not. It is leading to more cost, but can I do away with it? Can I assign that same functionality, that same action to some other step in the process flow? So you reduce the total number of processes. So after some time, what happens? You start to increase the functionality while you are also reducing the cost. After some time, when functionality, all your design teams are satisfied that, okay, I have all my transistors that I want to design with, they are available. Then you say, okay, now I'm just focusing on reducing cost. So you'll continue to reduce cost and you are in this stage. Then after some time, what happens? You can reduce cost no further. You enter into this stage. Your machines are all depreciated and there is no further addition that you are bringing with that particular technology. And once you reach this stage, what do you need to do? Once you reach the stage, the third stage, what is it that a good designer or a good engineer should already start to do? You should start to look at another MPV for whom the system is yet underdeveloped. And you start to develop that MPV while you are improving the efficiency of the first MPV. Let the improvement in cost over here fund the development of the next MPV for you, for your business. Okay. As by the time this MPV saturates, the other MPV should be in its high growth phase. And this is how companies continue to move from one S curve to another S curve and continue to grow. Okay. So you will see that S curves do not apply just to engineering systems. S curves apply to you and me on a daily life basis also. They apply to our learning. They apply to processes. They apply to business. They apply to every dimension of life. Even human population, if you look at it, it's following an S curve, is it not? Now, when we did saturate, we do not know. But if you look at this slide, there is another stage. I till now I talked about until just these 3-4 stages. There's this stage where the population then starts to reduce also, where the value that you bring starts to go down. Because what do you say? That, oh, I'm not able to bring more value. There is a competitor who is trying to bring more value. Then what happens is, just to extract more out of whatever you've already invested, you try to add more you try to add some more functionality, or you try to reduce some functionality, you trim it, and the cost may still reduce or cost may remain same. So the overall value can reduce. And it is observed that it does reduce in systems. So before you reach into even third stage, I would say you should already start to look at how to develop the next MPV, which is the next MPV that you should work on. So do you want to take the example of cell phones, for example? All of you have a cell phone. We started with feature phones. The feature phones, the first MPV was portability. So the first cell phone was heavy like anything, but still there was no wire. That was wireless thing. That MPV improved. Cell phones started to become lighter. After some time, we realized, oh, ab isko और light करने का फायदा नहीं. They added music. So earlier Nokia phones had music in it. After some time, that the quality of music, all those things improved. The performance of the processor improved. Then they said color screens. So small colored screens would come in. Then Apple came up with it and said, oh, I want a touch screen and no keypad. That was a completely new MPV. And they developed that MPV like anything. The first touch screens were resistive. Today they are capacitive, and so on. The quality of your touch screen has improved. The strength of the glass that you use for the touch screen has improved. There is Gorilla. It started with the natural, regular LCD, then it moved to LED, then Gorilla Glass, and so on. Despite so that the system is more robust. So you're adding more MPVs, and you see the mobile market has evolved from pillar to post, from where it was to where it is today, and it continues to do so. Today they started to work on cameras. They're still continuing to extract more out of the camera MPV. They have added 2 cameras, 3 cameras, so on, so that you can have macro photo also. You can have portrait, and you can have a night mode, and you have so many additional features. We are adding a new MPV of AI, so the phone can do so many more things. We are talking about improvement in the super system, where we have a watch associated with the phone, and so many things. So they're moving from one S curve to another, and another, and to another, and the market is continuing to grow. And all of this is happening. You see, we all understand that this is innovation. Are you able to see this? Any questions till here? No questions? Let me ask you a question then. You have, all of you have started to work on some project. Am I right? Which part of the S curve is your project in? Is the product in as of now? Can you tell me this? Tell me the product and tell me where is it today. Is it in first stage, second stage, third, or the fourth stage? I can ask you this question in the NSEM exam. How would you find out? Which part of the S curve are you in? Is your product in? Yeah, how do you find out, Rajni and Kartikeya, when you're saying transitional? How do you find out whether it is in transitional stage or it's already in third stage, and you are assuming ki, it was not adding value, and maybe now I'm adding value to it. Maybe you're simply transitioning your product from one MPV to another.
Sir, we were told how to measure MPV. So at least using those tools that we were told that to measure MPV, it feels like we're in the transitional phase of increasing function. Obviously, that might be mistaken. Like, I think surely it's not like that simple, but yeah, I think transitional phase would be right.
Okay.
Sir, I think the patent that the idea that implemented in the paper is already use some MPVs. So I think we are just transferring from one curve to the next one, because we are doing the training part, and if to
So it means you're
transfer
telling me
future.
that you are in the second phase.
Second phase, yeah.
So the transition stage, you're moving from one curve to another. So usually,
Yeah.
so this is called a transitional stage because that is the place where you say that, okay, that you should intercept the stage 3 of your previous MPV when your new MPV is at this level, where the functionality is almost all there and the cost is high, and you want to reduce that cost. But the functionality is what people will start to pay more for.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So there are tools to help us understand which part or which stage our system is in. Okay. So what you do is you look at the trends of, for example, number of inventions. How many patents are being filed on this topic? What is the kind of innovation happening around this subject? Okay. Then you look at the level of invention. So what do you mean by level of invention? Anyone?
So how it is impacting the society? That
Okay. Anything else?
or the recent trends that going on in that field.
So it's not really the society, it's about that engineering system. When you are talking about a new feature, do you realize it's like a seminal contribution. It's like You're adding, completely bringing about a new MPV into existence. What did Apple do when they came up with the first iPhone? They actually brought in the concept of a new MPV altogether. That, oh, my phone does not have a keypad. Now my touch screen, I have a touch screen. That's the new MPV. So it requires a visionary or a lot of understanding of trends of engineering system evolution to be able to do that. And that contribution, that changes the entire direction of how the market would be or stay in the future. So if the levels of invention are very high, you can be safely assuming that, okay, we are probably in stage 1. If that is something that you're coming about and talking about a product, then you are something like stage 1. And when you do things like feature transfer, or use the techniques like function oriented search, so that you bring in a new functionality from some other domain to this particular product also, that could be like that. Inventions that would do feature transfer or function oriented search could be like that. Okay. Then after some time, what happens is, you're talking about touch screens and something happens. Then what happens is there are incremental inventions. They are still valuable because the first idea is not implementable as is. So you make more inventions, you write more patents, but the level of inventiveness is lower. There comes a point when the level of inventiveness actually dips to a low, a very low, where your entire focus is on getting things to work. Okay. Now it's just implementation kind of inventions that you are filing. So the inventiveness is low. Once you get the system to work, okay, and the number of inventions, because they're about system optimization only, they increase. There's a certain number of inventions, but the quality of those inventions are low. People start to recognize it. Array, this is a hot area. This is a hot area. I need to invent here. I need to be here. Okay. Lots of people enter in, but the level of inventiveness is low. Then some people will move out because they've lost the market, or they chose a direction which was not accepted by the society or the customers. So inventions in those areas will start to dip. And there would be some people which would say that, okay, that idea is good, but no one is going to pay that kind of cost for that idea. Let me pick up that idea and then include it in my invention. So the level of inventiveness will improve a little. And when that happens, you say that, okay, now I'm in stage 2. But once you are in stage 2, the functionality is all there. All your focus and attention is on reducing the cost. So the level of inventiveness would reduce, but the number of inventions would again increase because the focus is on cost. After some time, when stage 2 is also crossed, what do you have? You have a system which is almost fully optimized. So pura nichoda ja chuka hai, people lose interest. People are now starting to work on another MPV. So the number of invention in this field start to reduce. And while the number of inventions are reducing, their inventiveness is also just incremental. Okay. In the 4th stage, the inventions kind of plummet. People see that, okay, there's no point in patenting this now because this is a commodity now. Everyone has it. When I patent this idea, the life of the product is not so long that is patent ko main 10 saal tak support karu. Okay. So the number of inventions kind of start to plummet badly. And their inventiveness is also low. Okay. And in terms of profit, your profits were very low initially in the stage 1. You are just investing in R&D and not really making money. It's only after you enter into stage 2 that you start to make some profit. Profits actually peak in stage 3. Profits actually peak in stage 3, and then profits also start to plummet. And therefore, if you do not innovate, as an organization, as a company, you are going downhill because the profits will also start to fall in stage 4. Okay? Because there will be other systems available at a lower cost, more functionality, more value they are adding. People will jump onto them. Your system will be discarded. How many of you even think of purchasing a feature phone today? So if someone stuck on to feature phones or the phones with keypads, they're not making any profit today, are they? No, they're not. So that is how things move. Yes, Amir.
Sir, you said that decreasing cost is not considered as an invention.
No. Decreasing cost is an invention. So for example, it's an invention, but the level of inventiveness, if it is simply an optimization of the system, is low. It is only an optimization of the system. So it is, you're solving some optimization in some unique way. So it's an invention, but not as seminal as saying that, okay, my phones would have a touch screen.
Okay, sir.
That's the difference. Invention to invention here. Level of invention is what you're talking about. Okay. So should we move forward? So this was what we just already talked about, that initially you're trying to increase the functionality. You want to reduce the cost, but actually initially the cost would also increase. That is the 0th stage, you may say. Then in the second stage, you add more functionality, some cost would also increase. You add more functionality, cost would increase. Third stage, functionality remains constant, cost reduces. Functionality also reduces, cost also reduces. For example, the feature phones that you have today, they again do not have cameras. See, the most advanced feature phones in early 2000s, in the early last decade, had good cameras in them. But the feature phones that you get today have no cameras in them. And they're definitely much cheaper than the keypad phones that we had in those times. So the cost has reduced much more. Functionality has also reduced, and that is where you are in the 4th stage. And it is at this stage, when you are already in 3rd stage, that you start to look at what is the next MPV that I should start to develop, which is the next S curve that I should take. Okay. So we talked about cell phones. You will see the same thing happening for computers. You will see same thing happening for computers. We had huge mainframe servers, and today you have laptops, you have yoga pads, you have, new MPVs have come in. Touchscreen computers, flexible form factors, all that. There was a time when the number of ports was a MPV, so you kept on adding more ports. Today, you see your computers have hardly, if you have a Mac, you hardly have a port or two. So that MPV is, the number of ports is reducing, functionality is reducing. So you're in stage 4 with regard to the MPV of number of ports. Why? Because you're having wireless. You're doing AirDrop and so many other things. Okay. So new MPVs come in, and as new MPVs come in, old MPVs lose their luster and the functionality starts to reduce. Let's look at trend of transition to super systems. See, all of us know that there used to be printers. There are printers only. There were scanners. You don't usually see scanners today in the market. There are photocopiers. Again, you see photocopiers in the market. But today, if you go out into the market and you want to purchase a printer, they will say, oh, why don't you take an all-in-one? It has a printer, scanner, and a copier all in one. So that is the trend of transition into super system. And you will see this trend also playing out, even, for example, even in the mobile phone market. You had a mobile phone, you have a music player, you had a, there was a time when we had DVD players and MP3 players and all that separately from a mobile phone. We had a huge camera that we would carry with us. Today, everything, a small cell phone does everything. The quality of photographs that you can get from a cell phone is almost equivalent to a SLR camera. Okay, almost, but yeah, almost like that. You have that kind of AI algorithms put in, image processing thing put in, that it's almost like an SLR. It's definitely equivalent to an SLR camera of 10 years back. So that is the trend of transition into a super system, where multiple component, and see, this is also the trend of trimming, that now in a office you no longer need a scanner separately, you no longer need a photocopier, you just need one printer, all-in-one printer. So you've trimmed these two components from your office desk. So this is the trend of transition to super system. Another trend that is very interesting, which all of you should think about, is a trend of increasing dynamization, which says that as an engineering system evolves, it and its components become more dynamic. So there is just a monolith earlier, which goes to something with one joint, then something with multiple joints, then something which is elastic, then powder, liquid, gas, and field. One example of this, for example, is rulers. There's a ruler, and there are folding rulers. There is this measuring tape, which is elastic in itself. And today, you must have noticed that there are these laser rulers. You throw in a laser, and there's a camera in there also, which measures the delay, and you're able to measure the distance or the length of a device. So you move from monoliths to multi-joints to elastic to field, and you will see that this trend is almost everywhere again. Okay, so trend of dynamization is a very, very interesting trend. There are sub trends to trend of dynamization, and you just you look at lights. There was just one level of lighting that was available earlier. Then there would be two levels of fans ki baat karo. There was just one speed at which a fan would work initially, then two speeds, then multiple speeds, then a full range in which the fan would work. Then you talk about things like AC, where the cooling would happen naturally, or fields where you would not even have air flowing in, and stuff like that. So these trends exist in engineering systems, and they are valid trends. They are statistical trends, and they can be kind of statistically proven in a way. Now, it may happen that in some engineering system, you may want to leapfrog from here to directly here, one place to another, completely jump and skip intermediate stages. And if you are doing that, that is great. But if somehow you notice that in the engineering system that you are proposing, you're going in the opposite direction, you need to be extremely careful. You really need to be extremely careful. Okay. So that kind of talks about, or that kind of completes the problem identification stage of TRIZ. And I mentioned that I will talk about another solution thing, which is ARIS today. As I mentioned, ARIS is not even introduced at level 1. ARIS is talked about only in the advanced level of TRIZ courses, not at all in the beginners level. But I and Nitin both felt that we should introduce this to you, and therefore now I will give you a quick glimpse of ARIS. So what is ARIS? So just like TRIZ, ARIS is also a Russian acronym, and it means algorithm for inventive problem solving. See, TRIZ was theory for inventive problem solving. ARIS is algorithm for inventive problem solving. And like an algorithm, like a flowchart, step-by-step procedures are laid out, which incrementally evolve a complex problem to a point where it is simple enough to solve. Okay, and you will notice. So there are. What does ARIS do? ARIS helps us select the right set of TRIZ tools and use them in an effective sequence. It essentially makes inventiveness or invention into a multi-step process where you ask a few questions. Just give me a moment. where you ask a few questions in a particular sequence and you are able to come up with solutions or effective implementation of TRIZ on your system. So because it is this, we thought that let us introduce ARIZ to you. You can read much more about ARIZ in online and on books and in books, but it's good if we at least give you a primer of ARIZ in the class itself. Okay. Then the power of ARIZ is that it solves complex engineering problems using step-by-step approach, and it very rapidly achieves the best solution. Whether you have to apply substance field, whether you have to apply physical contradiction or technical contradiction, whatever level of abstraction you need to go to, it takes you there step by step. Another very strong benefit of ARIZ is that it is geared towards an ideal final result. So what is an ideal final result? Ideal final result is the model of the best solution to an inventive problem, where the problem would get solved without making any significant changes to the system. The system would automatically, very simply, frugally solve the problem. Okay. And it is aligned or based on the trends of engineering system evolution that we also just looked at. Okay. And since it is aligned to TESE, one can be confident that the solutions are reliable, they would be, and they can be considered as long-term solutions also. Okay. So what is TRIZ? So TRIZ essentially is about two funnels. The first funnel is convergence, that of convergence, where you converge from a fuzzy situation where there are too many facts and you do not know what to do with these facts and what to do with this system in the first place. So it helps you trickle down and bring your attention, brings you to able to focus on the real problem there. Okay. And the second funnel is like a diverging funnel, where you say that initially you feel that there are no resources that you have to be able to solve a problem. Kaise karoge is problem ko solve? And as you move ahead in TRIZ, you realize that over the time and over steps, you add more and more resources which you can use to solve the problem. I will give you an example soon. So it is essentially like, in terms of starting or the problem definition, you start with a rough, fuzzy idea, a fuzzy idea, and by the end of it, when you, for example, make a function diagram and you have function model and you know where the problem is, you have a very clear definition of the problem statement or what you need to solve. And on the other axis, you are kind of expanding the resource base. So initially, when you have the engineering system, there is very limited sense of what are the super system resources that I could use. But as you go towards making the functional diagram, you already, in the component analysis stage itself, you start to list down more resources. Okay, this is a super system resource, this is a super system resource, and you identify those super system resources which could be relevant to finding a solution. So ARIZ kind of does a brute force method to gives a brute force method कि आप कोई भी possible solution or solving component को miss ना कर दो. Okay. So it is just like हमने TRIZ को 3 major parts में divide करा ना. We said okay, for the first stage is problem identification, then solving the problem, then solving secondary problems. So in the same way, ARIZ is actually about restructuring the original problem first. Then once you've restructured the original problem, you know what the technical contradiction is, physical contradiction is, substance field model is, and you solve those. So that is the second stage. And then once you have some solution in mind, you analyze the solution. So there are 3 stages here. Each stage has sub-steps. The first stage is restructuring the original problem, where you analyze the system, you analyze the resources, and you define the ideal final result. That what is it that I really want? So you end up formulating the physical contradiction. Why am I not able to arrive at the ideal final result? Because there is some system, some component which is expected to behave or expected to demonstrate have 2 parameters which are both genuine, but they are in conflict with each other. They are opposing parameters, but they are both genuine requirements. Okay, so that is the output of the first stage. The second stage is about resolving the physical contradiction. How do you resolve it? You apply knowledge bases, you apply effects, you apply standards, and you apply principles. So what is a knowledge base? TRIZ boasts of a knowledge base because it has so many patents that it has studied. It boasts, or it talks of a scientific database of physics, of chemistry, of engineering, which can be applied to engineering systems. For example, if I say that there is a there's a water spill over here, or there is water in a jug somewhere. How many ways can you transfer that water from this jug? Transfer this water out of this jug without really moving the jug. Ideas? Let us say there is this. Hello? Yeah. Let us say there is this pot, an aquarium. Let's say there's a fish also in it. And there is water in here. How many ways can you remove the water from here?
So we can pump the water out of it. And if we don't, if we are limited not to move the jug, then we can pump the water out of it or make a hole in the jug to get water out of it.
No, you're not allowed to destroy the jug also.
So we can
movement is also limited, huh?
Yeah, you cannot move the jug, you cannot destroy the jug.
Sir, if there was no fish, you can evaporate the water.
You can?
Evaporate the water, like sunlight.
So even if there is a fish, the fish would die anyway. When you remove the water, the fish would die. I just made the fish for the fun part. Huh? So okay,
So
you
we
can
can
heat.
use-
You can heat and you can make the water convert to steam, and it can go out of the jug. Very good. What else?
So we can use small glasses to transfer the water into another vessel.
Okay, not really. Okay, so you would have lots of manual intervention in there, but other things, do some function oriented search. How do you remove liquids from one place to another? छोड़ो. How do you remove liquids?
So suck water straw की help से
Suck water through a straw can. Okay, so put in a straw there and apply some pressure, low pressure on the other side. Okay, create a pressure differential so water can be sucked out. Okay.
Yes.
What else? You've heard about capillary action?
Yes, sir.
You don't even need to suck the water out. You just have a small capillary in there and just put it in, and the water would just start to move out drop by drop. So see, when I gave you the problem, you could think of a few things. But when I talked about capillary action, capillary action can be used. When I say that, okay, I can agitate the water and I can do it in such a way that water would jump out. I'm not moving the jug, but what can I do? I can throw ultrasound waves on it. What would happen? The water would jump out. One of you gave the example of heat waves, thermal. So these are physics principles that you already know of. But when you are sitting there and trying to solve a problem, they will not occur to you right away. So there is this knowledge base. So if any one of you has even explored the Tech Optimizer tool, you will see it has the entire huge knowledge base already saved in that tool. This tool, which I put on Classroom, is not given to anyone in level 1, in the beginner's level. We gave it to you because we felt that you can benefit from it. But from what I have understood, hardly any one of you has used Tech Optimizer. Anyone who has used Tech Optimizer?
So I tried using it, but not for the assignment. Like I just for the sake of trying, like how things are working in that. But it's like the graphics are like too old, and like we are the Windows 10 guys, and the graphics are much pretty bad than XP.
Yeah. So how does that matter? The value is that it has the entire scientific database in it. The value is that if you want to change the function diagram, add a function or remove a function, you can do it with just a flick. Whereas if you were making those function models on a PPT or somewhere else, you know you will have to then move this here, then make another connection, then add another component, and so many things you would need to do. Over here, as you add a component in the component matrix, that already starts to pop up in your function model. Nothing. कर रहा है ना वो tool ऐसा, Khalid?
Yeah, so but still, like it's not adapted toward the current environment.
Yeah. So when I put the Tech Optimizer tool in there, in the next class, I very clearly said it's a very old tool. And if there is interest in any one of you, I can actually, we can work to develop it as a more current tool so that everyone can use it. It can be a mini project, it can be a capstone project, it can be something like that. I know it's very old, but then what? At least it does the job. Nahin?
Yeah.
So yes, we want to add more value, better graphics. So the MPV has moved from functionality to graphics today, but the functionality is still there. Or you can choose to struggle with PPT and continue making your function models and modifying them in PPT. Because when I was reviewing your work last class, for many of you, I said, okay, your components are less, this is more. We discussed on those directions also. So when I will ask you to add more components, you will at once have a flurry of changes to do in your function model, and then you will waste a lot of time on your PPT. Or forget the aesthetics in terms of visuals, get the thing done. Okay, that's your choice. I can't force you to do it, but that's a choice that you have. Okay. Then the third stage is analyzing the solution. Now that you have a solution, can you do something more about it? Does it really remove the physical contradiction? Are there any secondary problem that it introduces? Can I use the same solution to do something else also? And this is the last stage of ARIF. And the last thing is review all the stages. So analyze the system has multiple parts where you start with identifying the main function of the system, then engineering problem is formulated as engineering contradictions. So it's almost, the flow that we followed in the class, that is what you will do, but it's in a more structured way. There are questions that you answer and you go ahead and do it. You analyze the resources, you look at what kind of resources are there, and if there could be a possible solution coming out of one of those resources or not, and so on. Okay. You define the ideal final result. What is it that you're looking for? I'm looking for so you say that there is some component X. There is some component X which exhibits this parameter like this, and that parameter when it requires like this. So now this X is that ideal component. See, the component on which you had a physical contradiction, X is that component, that ideal component which does it in both the ways. And as we progress through ARIS, our initial contradiction problem is gradually reformulated into substance field models and physical contradictions automatically. Okay, and you talk of that function, that component X, and you search for a component now. You're not searching for a solution. If you have that component, the solution is already there. So for us, a psychological inertia is broken, and we are able to handle things in a easier way when we are using TRIZ there. Okay, we will just look at an example. Then, how to resolve the physical contradiction, use recommendations from the databases of scientific phenomena, change the mini problem, and, analyzing the solution, how to expand its applications, use recommendations of areas, and so on. Okay, so this is how the flowchart actually looks like, where you analyze the system. So this is exactly what I have talked about, and it's just putting that in a flowchart. You will see it in the in the recording also. So I'm not spending more time on it because I want to spend more time on problem solving with you in your project problems. Okay. So let's look at the problem and see how erase was applied there. You remember there was a problem of low voltage right in an SRAM cell that we talked about in one of the earlier classes. When I was introducing TRIZ, the session on 10th of February, I gave you an example of a 60 SRAM cell where you want to write at a low voltage.
Yes, sir.
So over here, we've redefined the problem in terms of an MPV. But what is the main parameter of value? The main parameter of value is low power consumption. Why do I even want to write at low voltage? Because I want to reduce the power consumption. The parameter of value is power consumption. Low voltage is incidental. That is the function of my system. Okay. So to achieve low power consumption, I know there is this power consumption formula CV square S, where if I reduce the voltage, I get very significant gains in my power consumption. And memories, I want to reduce the voltage of operation of the memories, and that is where we are talking about low voltage operation on the memory cell. I want to do low voltage write on the memory cell. Okay. So just to generalize stuff in the language of TRIZ, what we did was we said that, okay, let us define a transistor as an open switch or a closed switch. Okay. And we would want to simplify the model of the system there. We talked about SRAMs, we talked about memory cell and all that. Okay. So we say that, okay, we want to make a function model of the system without really looking at, okay, there's a circuit, but circuit is complex. Circuit will hide many things from me, or circuit is very specific representation of the, so the circuit is a very specific representation. When I have this presented as a circuit, you would find it difficult to find solutions if you do not know what a transistor is. If you're not an expert in circuit design, it will be very difficult for you to find a solution. So as a part of ARIS, I want to simplify this circuit analysis. Okay, that is where those symbols were coming in. We will just look at how the circuit would look later. So how do you do the write operation in a memory cell? You take the word line to high, you keep one bit line at 1, the other bit line you take to 0, and when the word line is high, this NMOS turns on, both the NMOSes turn on, this 1 gets discharged, this 0 gets charged, and you're able to write into the memory cell. Okay. So I'm quickly taking you through this because that is not your project. That was something that I did long back. Okay. So the write operation completes, but the problem is also that this other node, the real charging happens from this device. Okay. And I know that when I'm discharging this node, this device is giving current, and when I want to charge this node, this device is giving the real charge. So I actually want this device to be weak, but I want this device to be strong. I want this to be weak so that my discharge can happen faster and there is no current coming in from here. Kirchhoff's law, all of you remember? You did it in the first course, digital circuits course. Kirchhoff's law, DC या first course, जो भी आपका common core course था, उसमें आपने Kirchhoff's law करा था. You remember? So in that course, what did we say? That any current that will come here, it has to move out. You know, the current that comes has to move out. So the kind of current that I will have to discharge through this bit line would include the current that this pull-up is sending. So I want to discharge lesser current so that it can happen faster, so that it is lower power. So this pull-up should be weak. However, I also need to charge a capacitor here. And to be able to do that, this pull-up should be fast. So if I make the pull-up weak, then the write is slow. But when I make the pull-up fast, I'm not able to write well because I need to, again, it is slow. So I need to improve the speed, but something needs to be done. Okay. So I went into it and I started to make the interaction matrix. So this is the view from Tech Optimizer tool. So you see it is slightly archaic in the sense that it does not look as neat and beautiful as Windows 10 interfaces or an Apple Mac interfaces, but yeah, it does the job. I have my interaction matrix made there, and I can edit interactions. I can do lots of stuff in this view itself. Then I start to, there are these function tables that I could make. There is this function list that I could talk about. I could talk about cost of these functions and so many things here, okay, in this same view itself. This is the function model that emerged out of that tool. Okay, it does not look as beautiful as you would think a Windows 10 or a Microsoft PowerPoint thing would be, but it does the job. It has all the information in it. It talks about the harmful functions in the red color. It talks about the insufficiently performed functions in the dashed lines. It talks about everything. The tool does it automatically. I don't need to make a separate dash line. I just needed to say it is insufficiently done, and the dash line appeared automatically. Okay, so we make the function diagram, and we talked about these, insufficient functions in the picture. Then we did the cause effect chain analysis. This I did on PPT only. So in fact, this I did on XMind, the mind map tool. So we did the cause effect chain analysis, where we saw that the write operation is not efficient when VDD is low. Now, why is it not efficient? Now, 0 is not written well, 1 is not written well. Why is 0 not written well? And we went to the root cause. The root cause was that, VDD is low, VSS is high, and so on. Now, this root cause is what your specification is, that you want to operate at low VDD. So you stop going any further in the cause effect chain analysis. This is something you cannot change. This is your system specification. Okay. So now you have a cause effect chain analysis done. You know where the problem, where a possible solution could be. You have the functional model. So now you start to define your problem as a part of ARIS. You say that if pull-up is weak, then pull-up does not charge int node f. But pull-up charges slowly the int node t. So this is one contradiction. And there is the other contradiction, that if pull-up is strong, it charges rapidly int node t, but it also charges int node f. The harmful function is accentuated. So you go ahead and you say that, okay, what is it that I need? I have a product. There are int node 1, int node t, and int node f. There is a pull-up that is acting on those nodes, and there are two states, weak and strong. So when the pull-up is, when I represent that engineering contradiction graphically, so you see I am already coming to a semblance of a substance field diagram here. I'm already coming to a semblance of a substance field diagram here. So now there are two engineering contradictions. The recommendation is choose a contradiction where the function that you require the most is done well. Okay. For me, I chose, like I said, okay, I cannot yet choose it. So engineering contradiction 1, this is what it is. The pull-up is weak, but it does not charge, but it also charges the other node slowly. So for me, I said that not charging is more important than the fact that it is charging slowly, because not charging leads to functionality there. Okay. So I exaggerate the situation. Okay, the pull-up does not charge int node f, but it very, very slowly charges int node t. So it is necessary to introduce an ideal factor, an X factor, which enables pull-up to not charge int node f and charge rapidly int node t without any harmful consequences. So this is the ideal solution, is it not? I want to not charge one node and charge the other node. very rapidly. So ideal solution I have, the substance field diagram I had, then I went ahead to solve analyze the problem, continue to analyze the problem, step 2.1, where I say that where do I need the pull-up to be weak and where do I need the pull-up to be strong. So the pull-up that is linked to int node T is weak. The pull-up that is linked to int node F should be, so there is weak, there is a separation in space that I can talk about. So I know there is a physical contradiction, but there is a separation in space that is available to me. This could lead to some solution. In terms of time, I want them to be done simultaneously. So separation in time cannot be applied. So now I do the kind of component analysis again. I say, what are my system components that are available to me? What is my environment? What are my super system components? And what are inexpensive resources? There are cells adjacent to my memory cell. Okay, so I list down all the inexpensive resources. For example, in that paint filling example, the inexpensive resource could have been gravity, air, and so on. They are super system components, but they are inexpensive resources. They are always there. So ARIES in a way makes a distinction between super system and inexpensive resources, abundantly available resources. Okay, and then you go ahead and define the X factor, multiple problem statements, so many problem statements that the size of the pull-up itself charges int node T rapidly and preserves the ability of pull-up not to charge. So there is a format in ARIES through which you can formulate all these problem statements. Once you have formulated all these problem statements, you say, okay, size of pull-up should be large to do this and small not to charge int node F. So now you then start to formulate the physical contradictions. And when you try to solve those physical contradictions, you start to see that there are possible solutions here, there, everywhere, and so on. So again, I've not taken you through ARIES, but I've introduced ARIES to you where I'm telling you that this is a step-by-step approach where you ask questions, you go through those questions, and you're able to come up with solutions. More ideas where solutions would be possible. Okay, you are able to identify physical contradictions through which there could be solutions available there. Okay, so we will stop here. We will take a 5 minutes break, and then we will come back. We will come back at what time? We'll come back at let us say 12:30. Is that okay? No, 12:35. Okay. So we'll come back at 12:35. We'll go into our breakout rooms, and then I and Nitin will just come to your rooms and help you with your projects. We'll work on our projects. The breakout rooms already are defined in the same way. So we will then work on our projects. Any questions before we go for a break?
The ARIES that we talked about right now, that is solve your problem. Using this, you solve your problem. Is a sort of similar to the trees as well that we were using for our project one.
I'm sorry, दोबारा से बोलो.
जो ARIES अभी आपने अप्लाई किया है अपने प्रॉब्लम्स पे लिया ARIES जो था वो sort of similar to the trees that we had applied to our patent.
Yeah. ARIES is actually about applying trees tools only. It just is in a sequence. Nothing different. जिस तरह से मैंने आपको trees introduce करा है, it is in the format of ARIES only. So don't worry, if you've been just following the flow that we talked about, you're doing well. But ARIES, by asking you some extra questions, by insisting that you talk about ideal final result, it pushes you to write something and arrive at a solution faster. That's all that it does. It gives a structure to your problem solving method. Okay. So we'll meet at 12:35, and we will directly go into breakout rooms. We'll go to breakout rooms, and what is important is that you at least, we are missing around 10 to 20 people from the class as of now. Please use this opportunity of the break to call your friends, call your partners, and join you in the breakout rooms so that we can help you with the projects there. Okay.